This is the third video in my series on classes and objects in Python, and we're just going to be continuing on creating our user class. And as I mentioned in the last video, classes can be thought of as new data types. And generally, we're going to have properties and methods for these new data types. And the reason is that if we're just talking about data or the properties, well, we can probably use a list or a dict to store that. If we're just talking about a behavior, well, we can probably just write a function to do that. When our data type has both properties and behaviors, well, then we're going to write a class, and that's what we're doing here. And so we're going to define a few custom methods for this user class. We'll define something that encrypts the password. Okay, we need the self-reference, and we're also going to pass in the password. Okay, I did something else here. I started this method with the single underscore, and that's to indicate that we consider this method private to the user class, so it should not be accessed by applications directly when we write it. Okay, we indicated that it should be private, but in Python it's pretty much impossible to really make things private. Okay, but developers, if they open your class, will notice that it is started with a single underscore, and they'll treat it as if it's private, theoretically. Okay, so we're going to encrypt our password. We're going to write a method that checks our password. We're going to write a method that calculates the age. Okay, and I'm also going to write a method that overrides another one of the dunder methods that we get from the base object, and it's the EQ method. Okay, so you might think that, oh, it's kind of important eventually in our application to be able to check and see if a username has already been used. So I'm basically going to write a method, a simple one, to check this. Okay, another nice thing about the classes is when you call them, you can also import other classes or modules from Python. And to do some of the work we're going to be doing, I need the datetime library. I'm going to need this dateutil library. Okay, the dateutil is not part of the standard library, so you may have to install that. And I'm going to import hashlib so that I can encrypt the password. Okay, so with that done, we're ready to go ahead and write our custom methods. I'm going to start by defining this EQ method. Okay, so it's just going to be a simple Boolean method that indicates whether or not a username already exists. Okay, we'll move on and define our encrypt password method. Okay, so we're first going to encode our passed-in password, and we'll encode it as UTF-8. Okay, and then we'll just return an encrypted version of it. Okay, and the hex digest off the end is just going to allow us to print out a string representation. Now, I'm not claiming that this is going to be a secure method of encrypting a password, but I just want to be able to show that we actually are doing something here. Okay, and once we have a password, we're probably going to have a part of the application somewhere where we can log in. And actually, that is probably a case where we would have another kind of class, an authentication class, where we'll have a list of users somewhere, and we'll have their passwords, and we'll be able to check them. Okay, but the actual act of checking the password probably belongs to the user itself. Okay, we're going to have to make a couple changes to our initializer and probably our string. So I'm going to replace the password here with a call to the method that says to encrypt it. Okay, so this does make it a bit harder to get at password, all right, but it ensures that before we store the password, it's encrypted. All right, before I make a change to the string representation, I'm going to calculate how old the person is, and for this I'm going to use that date util and date time. The date util I'm going to be using to convert the string of the birthday into a date time object. Okay, and then we'll just return an integer of the current date minus the birthday. And I'll get all that as days. And then I'll just do some floor division on it. And we'll get a rough approximation of how many years old they are. All right, and we're not going to worry about the leap year or anything like that. Okay. All right, so now instead of printing out the birthday here, we might as well print out the age. So I'll replace that in string. And, probably realistically, we would also remove the password, but I'm going to leave it. Okay, so you'll just note that I basically made a private variable there. All right, this age is only available inside string. Any other variable that is preceded by self is available to the entire class. Okay, so to test our newly constructed methods, I wrote a little bit of code down here. So I'm creating a second user, and it looks like it's the same guy and he's trying to register twice. All right, so we're going to see if they in fact is the same person, and then we're going to try to let the guy log in with a different password than his super secure one up here. All right, and then we'll be able to see the get age in action when I print off the object representation. So let's see what this does. Okay, and obviously this is not very secure if I'm printing out the password, but you can see that, okay, we changed password into this hash string. Okay, we can see that, instead of the birthday, now we're actually getting a representation of his age as an integer. Okay, and when we run equal on the two objects, we see that it in fact does return true. Now, this is a simple implementation of it where we're just checking the username, okay, and if they're equal, we're going to consider the two objects are equal. All right, and that may be enough for whatever application you're trying. All right, and then somebody tried to log in with this super secure password, and we found out that they indeed could not be authenticated. Okay, so next up, we're going to see how to add properties to our class, and the properties are going to be actually methods that behave like the property attributes that we set up when we initialize the object. So we'll see you in the next video.